So today, let's talk about this Seiko Alpinist SPB197J1 Mountain Glacier Edition. So I've had this in my personal collection for probably about, I don't know, maybe a year to 2 years. I can't really recount, but I've had it for a while and I've actually put it on the market and it recently sold. So I wanted to make sure that I got this, whatever quality review out before I sold it, because I wanted to talk about my opinions, why I didn't wear it that much and why I eventually sold it. So first thing, let's talk about the specs. So we've got a 38 millimeter diameter, a 46 millimeter lug to lug, and a 13 millimeter height. So the diameter is a little bit of a point of contention. It's referenced as a 38 millimeter diameter, and I would agree that that's the diameter that you can observe. Long Island watches, they did a really good review where they show that if you measure from top to bottom, where you get the best capture of the circle, that you're getting around 38 to 38 and a half millimeters diameter. But when you measure diagonally, which most of us do, when you consider the inclusion of the crown guards and the dual crowns, you're getting more around a 39 millimeter to 39 millimeters and a half. And that's really the better reference to use because it wears much more like a 39 or a 40, which is probably one of the main reasons why I'm selling it. This in combination with this 13 millimeter diameter it wears extremely tall and proud, which I think if you have a larger wrist, it's gonna be perfect for you. But for me, with my 6.3 inch wrist, it wasn't exactly perfect. The finishing on this watch is done very well in my opinion. So we have a completely polished bezel, we have completely polished sides, that includes the crowns, and the sides of the bracelet are completely polished. So from the side view, you really get a lot of shine, and when you look at the watch directly, because of the bezel, you get a decent amount of shine as well. Another thing to mention is that the sides of this watch, even though we have a 13 millimeter height, 13 millimeters in combination with full polishing on the sides, as well as the amount of faceting that the sides have, it looks really nice in my opinion. It looks pretty refined, and it definitely gives the watch a good presence. Again, it's slightly overbearing for somebody with a smaller wrist like myself, but for somebody with a bit larger wrist, say 7 inches, I think that this would look incredible. Another thing to mention is that the tops of the lugs are completely brushed and the tops of the bracelet are brushed as well. But this bracelet, we can compare it to, say, my Hamilton Khaki Field 38. Both of these watches have an oyster style bracelet with a 20 to 18 millimeter taper, but on the Hamilton Khaki Field, the tops are more rounded, and light just really doesn't reflect in the same way. I guess that it kind of just rolls off. But on the Alpinist, because these links are flatter, the light tends to bounce a little bit better. And even though these tops are completely brushed, they have good light refraction. So that's really good for me, for somebody who likes watches with a little bit more shine. And again, the finishing, this interplay between brushing and polishing really gives this watch a good sports slash casual appearance. Next point about this watch is the dial. So the dial is definitely the moneymaker, the showstopper of this piece. It's what prompted me to buy the watch in the first place. And when I was looking at photos, I really got more of a light blue sense about the dial, and light blue is definitely a part of my everyday wear. So I was like, well, this will go perfect. But when I got it, I was quite surprised at the neutrality of the dial, because it can go between both light blue and gray, all within the same wrist roll or within different shades of light. So if you're worried that it's a little bit too light blue for your taste, I promise you it's probably a little bit better than you think. And it's quite genius that it can go between both of these colors when you consider how Seiko branded it as the Mountain Glacier Edition. It really lives up to the name. The hands and the indices are also very nice, very well done on this watch. So the hands are of a cathedral style. The way that they're shaped and the size that they are and the amount of lume that they have is done very well. Also, when you consider the cathedral hands on this watch, at first it kind of seems out of place. I definitely conceptually, I thought that they were out of place when I first looked at this watch. But when I got this watch in, I realized that these hands, they really give this watch its interdisciplinary identity between casual sport, maybe dress, that's kind of a stretch, but it gives it a level of refinement that it wouldn't otherwise have. So I really love the hands on this watch, and especially the seconds hand. The seconds hand, it looks long. The very end, the end that travels around the perimeter is like a triangle with rounded edges. But then the counterweight, the way the counterweight looks when it travels across the dial, it just, something about it is really addictive. It's like the most exquisite javelin I've ever seen, and I love it. And then next we have the indices. So the indices they're well done in the sense that most watches in your collection are likely not going to have this Arabic / triangle style. There are some Tudors, like say the Tudor 1926 that has this style, but other than that, I don't know of many other popular pieces that have this. So that makes it a nice addition to anyone's collection. Lastly, let's discuss the cons. So, okay, in my opinion, I'm not a fan of the Cyclops because there are many things that Rolex has done in the watch industry that have been adopted and have been widely used, and at this point are no longer completely associated with Rolex. But in my opinion, when I see a Cyclops, I immediately think of Rolex. When I'm looking at someone's watch across the room and it has a Cyclops style, the first thing I think is Rolex. I don't think that the Cyclops has been widely used in the watch industry since Rolex introduced it, and because of that, it's still so strongly associated with it. So I'm not a big fan of it, and I also kind of think that it was a manufacturing hack for Seiko, because if you think about it, now that they have this Cyclops, they no longer have to worry about the size of the date because it's going to be obscured by the Cyclops. And they no longer have to worry about the color of the date wheel because, again, that Cyclops obscures the view, and it no longer has to match the size or the color of the rest of the dial, which is something that they did on the original SARB 017. And when looking at that, I think it looks so much more refined, and it gives that watch just a stronger originality to its identity. So I'm not a big fan of the Cyclops, to say the least. And the last thing for me is the clasp on the bracelet. So because the clasp is kind of short in its length, but the size of the hinge is still the same, it ends up fitting a bit weird because I have to take out links in a manner to where I have the end of the clasp sitting on the center of my wrist. But when I do that, the length of the hinge ends up pushing some of the links off the side of my wrist and leaving a gap. I think that this is going to be an issue for people, again, with smaller wrists. I don't think that you'll experience this, but it's another thing to consider. To conclude, I think this is an amazing piece to add to anyone's collection. Any of the Alpinist variations are quite enjoyable as an enthusiast, but this model specifically has a very interesting dial, and it also was a limited production run that was only released in UK. There is some controversy about that because they ended up releasing 2 versions of this watch, but either way, I think it's comfortable to know that if you take a chance on this watch, that you'll likely be able to sell it with relative ease if you decide that it's not for you. If you don't sell it, you're going to have a piece in your collection that's really special and really enjoyable to wear. So anyway, thanks for checking out the review. I hope you enjoyed it.